The hero sits in ambush on a tree and says that he has the ability to change his occupation whenever he wants. He jumps down on an upright wolf in armor with a spear and strikes him. The hero notes that this is a story about the career advancement of a one-of-a-kind jack-of-all-trades. The character, clutching a sword, enters into a furious fight with a pack of wolves. In his hands, magic came to life, blue and orange clouds intertwined into a single whole, repelling the onslaught of opponents. While saying his name, Tsukasa Amashiki, he uses one of his spells, most likely based on the power of fire. The hero walks down the hall of an office building in a business suit and thinks that his first appearance in a company with an annual income of 300 billion must be stunning. He continues moving and notes that it is no exaggeration to say that the main hall is what makes the first impression of the company. It is like a hallway. The more organized everything looks, the more you feel the importance of the inhabitants. The character straightens his tie and says that he is what is called a job hopper, meaning someone who has worked for many different companies. The hero approaches the receptionist and tells the girl that he has a final interview to attend, and his last name is Amashiki. He thinks that the term job hopper in his case is about waiting for a good opportunity and honing his skills. Tsukasa rides in the elevator, looks at himself in the reflection, and thinks that the company he has a contract with is also an important step. However, the opportunities for development have become smaller, despite the size of this company. He rides in the elevator with the girl from the reception and smiles, fixes his hair, and notes that everything is going well. In his new place, he has overcome almost all the stages of selection and was able to reach the final interview. The character reminisces about the past and realizes that the selection process was very difficult for him. He reflects on his rivals and remembers those who were responsible for conducting the tests for him. The character sits in front of the office door, looking at the girl and thinking that only the final interview remains, after which he will complete the process of transition to a new job. He is ready for any questions, but it seems to him that everything may not go according to plan. The girl holding the folder with documents says his name and gestures towards the door. Amashiki, having collected his thoughts, stands up and responds to the address. The hero prepares for the interview, thinking that the experience he has gained earlier will help him, and this large company will definitely bring him success. He asks permission to enter, and steps over the threshold of the door, thinking that he is entering an office. However, after leaving the room, the character finds himself in an open area, surrounded by an endless field. He is completely alone. In the distance, over the horizon, clouds slowly float by. The character experiences deep surprise. Tsukasa thinks that he entered the wrong room by mistake. He remembers that it is not uncommon for large companies to have break rooms where employees can relax during their free time. He comes to the conclusion that he is in one of these rooms. The character turns around and realizes that there is no door back, and the surrounding space is just an endless field. The hero looks around in surprise once again and comes to the conclusion that he seems to have somehow ended up in a place that is completely unfamiliar to him. The hero panics and clutches his head with his hands, screaming and asking where he is and what kind of place this is. He is tormented by the thought of what will happen with his final interview. The character runs his hands over his face and feels his skin become softer. He looks at himself on the phone and realizes that this is what he looked like when he was 18 years old and realizes that he has become younger. Amashiki tries not to lose heart, consoling himself with the fact that with such experience in his new years, any company would be happy to hire him. He realizes that now is not the time to think about it, looks around the area again and wonders if there are such places in Japan at all and if he himself is really in Japan. The hero examines and touches the local plants, saying that he has never seen anything like them before. Small furry balls with wings fly past him. He is frightened by them, saying that he has never seen such creatures. The character stands in dense thickets of unfamiliar plants and looks around. The hero thinks whether it could have happened that he ended up in a completely different world. He remembers that the hitman is a technique popular in games and anime, but now it seems natural to him to think about it. At that moment, the hero finds something in the breast pocket of his jacket. The card says, Amashiki status. The character looks confused. He can't understand what it means. He didn't notice this card before. He tries to remember the typical Isekai things, menu, team, and status, and at that moment, he comes to a realization. The hero understands that this card with the status is information about him. However, he thinks that seeing the assessment of his abilities in the form of numbers is impossible in reality. He thinks that his magical powers are outstanding. He has been doing sports to maintain his health, but he is just a simple office worker. A system window pops up with the jack-of-all-trades specialization. The hero watches this window in surprise. The hero looks at the different system windows, surprised by the number of characteristics. He notes that his specialization allows him to switch between skills at will, and the amount of magical powers spent depends on the chosen profession. Amashiki wonders if this specialization might be a unique skill he has acquired through changing jobs many times. He wonders why the interview location is connected to another world. The hero sits down on the grass. He remembers that there were other people in line for the interview. He expects them to come, or perhaps some instructions to appear, but no one comes. No instructions appear. He realized that if his water supply ran out, the situation would become completely hopeless, and he couldn't just leave things as they were and do nothing. Amashiki believed that he needed to do something. The character confidently heads somewhere, thinking that being humble does not suit his nature. He is convinced that everything can be overcome if you start to act, so you need to approach the problem with a positive attitude. Amashiki sees a giant fantasy creature with wings and crooked paws, combining the features of a dragon and a praying mantis in the clearing in front of him. The monster notices him and rushes in pursuit of the character. The hero runs away at full speed and realizes that the situation has changed now, and that even if he runs as fast as he can, he won't be able to save them. He thinks that it shouldn't come to this. He suddenly freezes in place, holds out his hand in front of him and makes a gesture with it, inviting the creature to stop and talk to him. The giant tree located next to the character was felled by the monster. It rushes on, crushing and destroying everything in its path. The hero was left scared, but miraculously he is okay. The praying mantis did not touch him. Amashiki realizes that everything he has done so far is useless, and the huge insect, meanwhile, begins to slowly approach him, creating a new threat. He thinks that if he stays here, he will die, so he needs to find something. He notes that everything in his situation can be used as a weapon. A system window pops up, reminding him of his specialty, jack of all trades. The hero remembers his status card, which was hidden in his jacket. He takes it out and chooses the magician specialization, shouting it at the top of his lungs. Amashiki finds himself in the middle of mysterious magical patterns. He feels new knowledge and experience coming to him, and magic fills him. He understands that this is all the magical power of the world he has found himself in. The hero creates a ball-shaped projectile out of fire with his own hands and screams furiously, directing its force towards the enemy. He releases this fireball at the insect-like monster that has been chasing him all this time. The character is surprised and slowly lowers his hands. The creature, engulfed in flames, disintegrates into pieces, and then finally burns out, turning into ash. Amashiki, physically and emotionally exhausted, looks at the ashes, raises his hand and rejoices in his victory. Beads of sweat slowly drip from his body. The hero looks closely at his hands and thinks that as soon as he changed his job, he was able to see magic. He wonders if this could be the power of a jack of all trades that was given to him. The character is surprised and hears a happy sound. He wonders if this means that his level has increased, as he expected. He thinks that this really does feel like some kind of game. He looks at his status card again. Amashiki turns his gaze back to what remains of the enemy, and he disagrees with his previous thoughts. He looks at his hands and thinks that the only thing that can resemble a game here is the system. The hero realizes that he can still feel the flow of magic, although before it caused him headaches. The character thinks that underestimating the situation, treating it as a game, is a direct path to fatal consequences, and everything that happens to him is definitely not a joke. He stands up confidently and shouts that he will build his career, work for large companies, and strive for a better life. The hero thinks that a career is something created to climb the social ladder of modern Japan. In a world of magic and swords, where monsters move, will his career be useful? He understands that it will not be useful to him at all. A system window appears, informing you that your character has reached level 2. Amashiki falls to his knees, closes his eyes, and says that he still has a chance to rebuild his career. He explains that the power of a jack of all trades is to switch between any profession. How powerful this ability is became clear in the recent battle. If he raises his level, he will gain superiority wherever he is. The hero stands up confidently, straightens his clothes, leaves, and decides that he will hone his skills in all the professions of this world. Amashiki creates a water ball above his hand and thanks magic for not having to worry about water anymore. He thinks about how he needs to find a place to sleep, but definitely not in the open air. The hero thinks about the fact that he needs clothes, food, and shelter. These are all primary needs. He points out that, first of all, he needs to find some village. The character thinks about trying to change his activity. He calls the status window and notes that perhaps he will be able to choose a suitable profession there. A system window appears with a magic point counter. The hero calculates that for the sake of the battle, he spent 20 points to change his specialty and 10 on the fireball. Energy is gradually restored, so he will be able to use powers quite often. Amaseki is pleased to discover the hunter specialization in his card. With this specialization, his senses are heightened, and the likelihood of finding what he needs increases. He sniffs and listens to the ground and lies down. These actions allow him to detect tracks in the grass. The hero also finds blood on the leaves. He understands that it is about 2 days old. The character realizes that some tracks are human, others are wolf tracks. There was a battle or a hunt here. He thinks that if he follows these tracks, he will definitely find the village. Amaseki quickly makes his way through the tall grass, pushing it aside, and after a while, he finally comes to the village. It is surrounded by a fence, and smoke is coming from the houses. The hero notes that it is more of a village than a hamlet, but that is not important now. He understands that there are people there. The character thinks that he would never have thought that he would be so happy to see people, and he becomes a magician again. At the gate, he is met by a guy with a spear. Amaseki straightens his suit and tie and greets the guards happily. The hero tells the guard that he looks at him as if he is incredibly suspicious and asks why this is happening. The guard is menacingly silent in response. The guard says that the character's clothes are very strange and asks where he is from. He introduces himself by saying his name, Tsukasa Amaseki. Tsukasa says that perhaps it would be more accurate to say that he is a traveling mage. The guy with the gun is surprised by the hero's specialization, saying that a person with a job would not have made it here, it's too far. Amaseki looks back in surprise. The hero does not understand the expression with work, and the village guard asks him to show his status sign. Amaseki takes his card out of his pocket and hands it to the guard, noting that it is an odd way to prove his abilities. The guard is surprised that he is actually a mage and apologizes, saying that it is not something one encounters often. He cheerfully explains that human craftsmen are often hired by countries or aristocracies, or become adventurers in large cities, and are rarely found doing petty work in remote areas. The hero replies that he understands and in that case understands the guard's skepticism. The guard continues to explain that the masters move to where they can use their abilities to the maximum and get paid for it. Amaseki replies that he honed his magic in the mountains, but he realized that he missed living among humans, rightly withholding some details. The guard understands him and replies that it is not surprising that the hero lacks intelligence. The character notes that he has been labeled a fool. The guy with the spear is embarrassed and silent and then calls him by his first and last name. The hero responds and says that he can just call him Tsukasa. The guard wants to ask Tsukasa for a favor and calls him to go somewhere for a minute. The hero asks where he needs to go, and the guard replies that he wants to discuss everything in detail at the village head's house. Finding himself next to a large wooden house, the guard calls the head of the village and asks him to come to them for a second. The chieftain asks in surprise what is going on with the guard named Zozo. He replies that a jack-of-all-trades has now appeared in their village. The elder exclaims with delight and asks Zozo again if this is true. The guard replies that he checked the hero's status and he really is a magician. Amaseki asks in bewilderment somewhere to the side. The village head adjusts his clothes and introduces himself, stating his name, Esta. The hero is glad to meet him and also introduces himself. He says that Zozo wanted to ask him for something and hands over his status card. The headman explains the hero's task, telling him that monsters, silver wolves, have appeared near the village. The hero realizes that the tracks he saw in the forest belong to these wolves. Now he has a complete picture. The village chief says that they would have managed on their own if there were fewer wolves, so they ask Mr. Tsukasa to defeat them. The character asks if there are any more jacks of all trades here, to which he is told that only villagers remain. The hero realizes that jacks of all trades are even rarer than he had previously thought. He smirks and thinks that there is always a threat of monster attacks here. The risk is very high, but there is also a demand for professions related to fighting. Tsukasa asks to tell him more about these silver wolves. The village chief and guard are very happy about it. According to the descriptions of Ista and Zozo, these wolves are monsters with silver fur, sharp claws, and fangs. They move quickly and have an excellent sense of smell. Their danger level, determined by all adventurers, is almost the lowest, E. The village head tells the hero that the villagers can defeat the wolves if they work together and as a big team, but their village is small and everyone already works hard to survive. The elder notes that if any of the people are injured during the fight with these creatures, they will no longer be able to work, and those who remain in the settlement will need protection. The hero understands that the monsters are preventing the evacuation of the population. Esta and Zozo strongly ask the character to fulfill their request. They promise to make sure that he gets a good payment for his work. They beg him to help. The hero thinks and realizes that fighting monsters is something he has already encountered, so it will be easier for him to make a decision. Moreover, Tsukasa remembers that he has decided to strive for career growth in this world as well, which means he will do everything that will benefit him, so he easily accepts the offer. Esta and Zozo are very happy about this event. They thank the hero heartily and pat him on the back. Tsukasa asks them not to thank him yet, because he hasn't started work yet. But Zozo shouts his thanks anyway. The hero thinks of them as naive villagers. Amaseki notes that he knows nothing about this world. He has no income, no shelter, no food, and since he will now be in the care of Zozo and Esta, it is better to start with payment, considering that they are the first people he met in this world. The hero says that he must hurry then, but stops and asks if it would be too much trouble for his new acquaintances to give him something to eat before starting work. Tsukasa is worried that they won't have any food either and thinks that this can't be fixed. However, he still gets some food, thanks Stu and Zozo for the meal, and goes outside. He notes that his stomach is full, and in addition he has received clothes that are comfortable to move in. At first, he plans to return to the tracks he saw a little earlier. The hero in a new beautiful cloak stands in a clearing and is surprised by the number of plants that he has never seen before. He is interested in what they can be called and how the inhabitants of this world use them. The hero remembers his status and is going to check the list of professions in it. He discovers the profession of appraiser. This is a job that allows you to determine the value of anything. If you apply it to a person, you can find out their status. However, the completeness of the information depends on the level of the profession. With the help of this profession, he discovers information about plants nearby. One of them is an effective healing herb for cuts and burns, and also for creating medicines and potions, dozuru. The hero thinks that if he sells it, he can get some money. The hero collects these herbs and thinks that in the section with professions there was a pharmacist and an alchemist, and in the future it might be a good idea to create medicines and potions for yourself, which opens up great prospects. The hero sees a false dozuru. Due to his abilities, it tastes terrible and causes stomach pain. Tsukasa is surprised and says that it is very dangerous, and if he did not have the skills, he would have collected the false grass. The character notes that his ability is very convenient, even in a world without the internet. But he can always, as if by magic, extract impeccably accurate information from the depths of consciousness. He thinks that there are some peculiarities in changing professions. Tsukasa reasons that in games you can reach a certain level in a profession and then switch to another. Here it is similar. He did not lose his skills as a magician, being an appraiser. The hero explains that, in other words, the master's skills accumulate. At this time, he creates a stone point out of nothing with his fingers, pronouncing the name of the desired object. Tsukasa is surprised that the tip came out smaller than he expected, but he takes it seriously. Suddenly, his creation rushes into the air at a tremendous speed, which he did not expect. The hero looks after the object, dumbfounded. He feels that he has suddenly lost a lot of magic power and falls to the ground, revealing his status. The character sees that he has spent 50 magic points out of 550 to try to create a spearhead, which flies away from him. The hero, lying on the ground, is annoyed and realizes that using magic, not as a mage, is extremely ineffective. Tsukasa lays down on his back to regain his energy, while he thinks that definitely, skills that are suitable for the current profession will be the most effective, otherwise the unique aspects of any job would be meaningless. He thinks that being able to use magic as a swordsman and a sword as a mage, even if the strength is low, is still great. The hero reasons that it is convenient for surprise attacks, and the advantages outweigh the high consumption of strength. Lying on the grass, Tsukasa continues to reason that, however, with his current amount of magic points, he won't be able to do anything, and in order to properly use his power, he would need to level up and fully recover. While the hero is resting, he hears the footsteps of an animal next to him. He listens warily. Rising to his feet and hiding in the bushes, the character, among other things, smells a faint scent of an animal next to him. He thinks about whether it could be a silver wolf. Tsukasa realizes that it is indeed a silver wolf in front of him. He notes that they are indeed walking right next to the settlement he was just in. A system window appears, reporting the characteristics of the silver wolf. The character notes that, as he imagined, the level of the wolves is still lower than his own, which means that if it comes to a fight, he will be able to somehow get out of it. Amashiki concentrates on his thoughts and comes up with a plan that should work. He shouts the job change spell and becomes a mage again. A glow appears around him and he creates stone projectiles. The hero kneels down and shoots the created stone blade, casting another spell. The blow from the tips hits the wolves straight, who were not expecting the attack, and one of them manages to avoid being hit. Tsukasa notices this and is surprised that he missed. The wolf looks at the hero with anger and rushes forward, attacking the master. The character uses the spell to create a stone point again and directs it straight at the last wolf. The wolf manages to hit the hero, but at that moment the stone tip shoots out. The animal, pushing the hero away, falls backwards very close. Tsukasa watches him carefully. The character carefully examines the defeated enemy, touches him with his finger, checking if he is alive. Finding that the wolf does not react, he calmly sits down on the ground and exhales after a hard battle. Tsukasa hears the pleasant music again, coming from an unknown source. He realizes that his stats have improved, and his maximum magic power has increased again. He notes that none of this feels real. The hero gets up and rejoices that he was finally able to level up. The character hears animals approaching, and realizes that there is a good chance the rest of the wolf pack will come for him. He decides that he will try the strategy of constantly changing jobs some other time, and prepares for battle. The hero defeats the remaining wolves and triumphantly declares that he will force them all to invest in his career. After a tough battle, Tsukasa remembered that when he left the village, Zozo reminded him that the silver wolf's claws would serve as proof of his victory, so he should not forget to take them. The hero takes a claw from one of the wolves and examines it carefully. He wonders what kind of creature this silver wolf is. He looks at his defeated opponent with trepidation. The character reflects on how the wolf's determination to attack him is very unusual. It was a matter of life and death, something unimaginable in modern Japan. He realizes that to survive here, he needs to hone his job-hopping skills. Besides that, there was something else on the character's mind. During his last level up, while looking at his status card, he noticed that his stats were growing. The hero notes that the most noticeable increase in magic and intelligence, he attributes this to the fact that he defeated monsters as a mage, and if he had used a sword, something else would have improved. Suddenly, Tsukasa senses new enemies approaching. The character sees a new pack emerging from the bushes. He understands that there are more animals. It seems to him that the first three are the leaders of the pack. The wolves growl aggressively and rush towards the hero. Tsukasa unleashes his sparkling spells on the enemies that suddenly appear, like a predator lying in wait, fully prepared for this fight. Stone missiles, which he wields with astonishing skill, begin to fly out of his hands again. The hero skillfully directs them towards the aggressive wolves rushing towards him. The projectiles follow one after another, quickly striking their victims, but the three most powerful wolves manage to skillfully dodge the deadly blows, demonstrating their agility and dexterity. But the shells gradually hit the leaders of the pack, although this does not stop them, and they quickly rush towards Tsukasa. The character realizes that the agility of the wolves exceeds his own abilities and he has difficulty coping with them. However, he skillfully continues to strike accurately at his targets, demonstrating his mastery. The hero understands that he barely touches the animals with his shells, and it seems to him that in this way he will never be able to defeat the silver wolves. However, the beasts, hit by the shells, fall one after another, flying past Tsukasa with their paws up. The hero looks at one of the defeated opponents and realizes that his projectiles passed through and mortally wounded the silver wolves. The character understands that this happened because his own magical power increased. Silver wolves rush towards the character. They continue to attack him, gradually approaching. Tsukasa dodges the blows and understands that he will not have time to use magic from such a close distance. The hero gets a new idea, to change his job. Right in the heat of battle, he changes his specialization to a swordsman, shouting a spell. The character gets a new weapon in his hands, a sword with a curved handle. Tsukasa fights confidently with his new weapon in hand, expertly dispatching his opponents. He feels the extra strength in his hands due to his new specialization. The character realizes that the monsters now seem to move much slower. He attributes this to the fact that he has become a swordsman. He continues to strike the wolves one after another. The hero deals with another wave of enemies and exhales. He hears the pleasant sound again. The hero looks at a status card and realizes that his attack and agility skills have improved, just as he expected. Tsukasa thinks that each of his jobs increases certain stats, which in turn means that he can control which stats he improves. The character thinks that this is a great discovery, and once he has decided on each stat, he will need to try experimenting with them more. From the seemingly calm forest, some sounds come that attract the hero's attention. He quickly grabs his sword, ready to take it out at any moment. Tsukasa looks around and thinks about how it's been almost an hour since the battle ended, and he hasn't seen any more monsters around him. He thinks that going deeper into the forest and risking attracting the attention of the rest of the pack is not the best decision. The hero counts the claws of the wolves he has collected and realizes that he has already defeated 13 of them. He thinks that he has significantly reduced their numbers. The character walks across the clearing and sees one of the defeated opponents. He understands that he has come to the place where he has already fought before. Tsukasa looks closely at the defeated beast and says that he thought that the remains of the wolves would disappear immediately after the battle. But he looks at them now and realizes that the fur is in surprisingly good condition, and Zozo mentioned that the symbol of victory is the claws. He remembers his appraiser specialty and uses it again. System windows appear with wolf part evaluations. They report that the pelt is warm and soft to the touch, suitable for clothing and blankets, and the meat is heavy but rich in flavor. The hero thinks that all this can be useful to him. He believes that he should not neglect his capabilities. He uses a telekinesis spell and lifts the defeated enemies into the air, thus taking them with him. Tsukasa decides to bring all the wolves to the village. He thinks that if he were a hunter he could butcher them himself, but he thinks he's had enough for today. The hero exhales. He decides to leave the task of cutting up the meat to the villagers. The character uses magic to take the animals with him and sets off towards the village. The villagers, seeing the bodies of silver wolves from afar, sound the alarm. They shout to each other in panic that they have a problem. Monsters are heading towards them, silver wolves. The settlers see a huge ball of wool coming towards them from the forest. They grab their weapons in panic. The village chief faints. Everyone screams that they have never seen such a monster before. The villagers carefully approach the wolf skins, holding their weapons in their hands. One of the guards carefully looks inside, sees Tsukasa's tired face there and gets scared. The hero drops all the animals at once, exhaling tiredly and noting that he has finally arrived. This frightens the locals, who still have not understood what is happening, and they run away in panic in all directions. Zozo recognizes Tsukasa and yells at him in fear, asking what this is, and pointing to the wolfskins. The hero looks at the guard in surprise and turns around, realizing what he is being asked about. He replies that there is a silver wolf next to him. Meanwhile, the carcass hangs in the air and turns in all directions. Zozo asks, in fear, why the wolf is floating in the air. The character explains that it is due to telekinesis. He asks how unusual it is to see magic in action in this area. Tsukasa explains to the villagers that he thought the wolf carcasses might be useful, so he brought them to their village. Zozo is surprised that the hero was able to carry them all on his own. The village chief runs to the hero and joyfully shouts that Tsukasa has returned alive. The hero gives the village chief a bag, saying that it is proof of his hunt. He says that he brought the claws of 11 wolves, although in fact he defeated 13. The character tells the villagers that he combed the area just in case, but found no more wolves, from which he concludes that he destroyed their entire pack. The villagers listen, spellbound, and then begin to rejoice, hugging and congratulating each other. The hero looks at the celebrations of the villagers with confusion. He thinks that this village does not have anyone who could protect them. They must have been very worried. He thinks that his level has increased, and he has learned a lot, which means that today is a productive day. Tsukasa happily hugs Zozo, shouting that now the whole village is his debtor. The hero is a little embarrassed. While the guard is shaking him vigorously by the shoulders, the hero explains that he is simply doing his job, and there is nothing to thank him for. The village chief explains that despite this, even so, they owe him their lives. Zozo and Esta accept the bag of silver wolf claws and bow before the hero for the work he has done. Tsukasa thinks that he is offering his services for a reward. He did not expect that the villagers would thank him so much. Esta and Zozo invite him to go to the square. The hero thinks that this situation reminds him of the time when he made a deal with a big company. He remembers two men in suits who think that he is a typical university graduate who thinks that everything is elementary. The people in suits are whispering. The hero is thinking about how he will have to do everything himself again and play the hero. He remembers that X and Y said that they didn't like it, but he is ready to bet that there will not be a next time. Tsukasa continues to remember his ordinary life and thinks that it was all jealousy and misunderstanding between colleagues, although he considered it something normal back then. The hero thinks that he will no longer be able to withstand this comfortable atmosphere in the settlement. He loses his temper and suggests changing the topic of conversation. The character points to one of the defeated animals and asks the villagers if they would mind taking on the task of butchering the silver wolves. Zozo agree to this. They say to give this job to them because they are perfect for it. The hero thinks that the atmosphere has really changed, as he wanted. The men begin cutting up the meat, and the village chief approaches Tsukasa and asks what he plans to do with the materials next. The hero says he would sell the wool and leave the meat for the villagers. The chief thanks him, saying that the meat is a rare delicacy. Meanwhile, they begin to heat up a pot over the fire to cook the meat they have caught. Esta tells the villagers to bring everything they have. The villagers happily bring out plates of vegetables, various bottles, and other food. The village headman also shouts for everyone to get out their alcohol. The villagers take turns pouring their drinks into one large barrel, and the head of the village says that today they can drink without fear. The hero is sitting on the porch of one of the houses, next to someone's child. People around are having fun, peeling vegetables and preparing dishes. Someone is drinking from a barrel, someone is setting the tables. The hero thinks that all this has turned into a real holiday. Tsukasa falls sideways, almost losing consciousness. The child next to him is dumbfounded. The village chief notices this and runs to the protagonist, calling his name. Esta asks the character what happened to him. He apologizes and says that he just needs to rest and adds that, in fact, he would stay in their village if it was possible. The elder agrees and apologizes for not suggesting it sooner. The village chief escorts the hero to his house and shows him where he can lie down. Only when he reaches the bed does the hero fall onto it with all his might. Tsukasa takes off his armor and lies on his bed, thinking about how he is going to start all over again in this new world. He talks about using the village as a base to hunt more monsters, level up, and explore the world, as he knows too little about it. The celebration of the victory over the wolves continues outside. The hero is blinded by the sunlight. He is surprised that it is still light outside. He thinks about how night has not yet come and closes himself from the light from the windows. Tsukasa thinks about how he almost managed to fall asleep. He supposes that in this world there is no night at all. He buries his face in the pillow he was sleeping on. The village chief knocks on his door, asking the hero if he is awake. The character gets dressed and opens the door. The chief explains that Tsukasa was fast asleep and they did not want to wake him. The hero replies that he is very grateful for such an attitude. The village chief says that such a dream is not surprising after Tsukasa's battle with the wolf pack. He says that he brought him breakfast and offers it to him to taste. The hero is given a tray with 2 plates of food and bread. He replies that he will not refuse food because he has not eaten anything since yesterday evening and thanks the headman for the food he provided. Tsukasa happily starts eating, spooning up food one after another. He thinks about how the soft sweetness of the milk in this dish is perfectly combined with the vegetables. He notices that there are even pieces of potatoes and carrots. The hero really likes the dish provided. The character also notices pieces of meat there. He wonders if it belonged to the monster he fought. He thinks it's beef, and it just melts in his mouth. The hero can't imagine that such wonderful meat belongs to a monster, because it tastes so good. Tsukasa thinks about how the fat just spills out when he bites. He breaks a piece of bread and mixes it with his food. He thinks that the bread goes perfectly with the stew. As he expected, the hero continues to scoop up spoon after spoon. He really likes the food that was given to him. The character thinks that such a simple dish tastes just perfect, just what he needed to satisfy his hunger. Behind the character there is a man in a suit. His eyes are hidden. The hero turns around but does not see anyone behind him. Tsukasa finishes eating and gives the dishes to the girl. He thanks her profusely for the food she gave him. The girl gets embarrassed and takes the dishes back. The village chief calls the hero to come with him into the room. There he takes out a heavy bag and places it on the table, saying that this is the hero's reward for winning the battle with the wolves. The character carefully opens the bag and asks if Esta objects. Inside are 13 silver coins with beautiful patterns. The hero thinks that he does not know the value of these coins. He tells the head of the village that he does not know how valuable these coins are and asks him to tell him more about them. Esta agrees and begins her story. He explains that, for example, to buy a small snack he will need several of these coins. The hero understands everything. The village chief explains the local exchange rate. An iron coin is 10 yen, a copper coin is 100, a silver coin is 1,000, a gold coin is 10,000, and a large gold coin is 1,000 yen. After several clarifying questions, the hero realized that he needed to look for large coins. Esta says that the guild sets a reward of 1 silver coin for each silver wolf. He also says that the prices vary depending on the region, but they have a standard rate. The hero realized that the rate in this village was normal, and Esta regretfully explains that if they tried to bargain, they would get a bad reputation, and adventurers would not accept their tasks. The hero thinks that no one would have come to the aid of the villagers then. For them, it was a matter of life and death. He imagines 2 adventurers spreading evil rumors about the village. Tsukasa thinks that the villagers could easily take advantage of a man like him. Meanwhile, the village chief takes out another bag and says that it contains payment for the wolfskins. The hero counts the reward and finds 50 copper coins. Esta begins to explain that they usually pay for the skins with 8 coppers, but considering the character's merits, they decided to adjust the payment. Tsukasa stops the village chief and says that there is no problem and he understands everything. He thinks that in his world he would have been able to bargain, but it was Esta who helped him settle in. The hero reasons that money is important, but he does not want to spoil his relationship with the head of the village. The village chief comes to Tsukasa with another request, and the character responds. He explains that some villagers have suffered from silver wolves and need medicine, but there is not enough godzilla grass to make it. The hero realizes that these are the herbs that he collected in the forest before the battle with the wolves. Tsukasa thinks that he could heal the villagers himself, but he needs to use the methods that the villagers are accustomed to, otherwise it won't be appreciated. He takes the herbs he collected out of his bag and hands them to the village chief. Esta is surprised that the hero managed to collect herbs. He says that Tsukasa is something special. The character refuses the praise and says that he did nothing special at all. The village head says that he will now take the herbs to their local pharmacist. The hero is surprised that there is a pharmacist in the village. Esta explains that this is not exactly a pharmacist. This girl does not have any specific profession. The hero thinks that if there was someone with a specific specialization, he would be able to get new information. An old woman in baggy clothes suddenly opens the door for the heroes. She asks what they need and specifies that without grass, she cannot help them in any way. Tsukasa is surprised that the pharmacist yells at them right from the doorway. The village chief tells the herbalist that they brought herbs. The hero wonders if the woman talks like that to everyone or if this is a special case. The heroes enter a hut full of various herbs and potions. The apothecary asks them to come in quickly. The character notes an unpleasant smell throughout the room. He wonders if these are all medicinal herbs. The woman holds out her hand. The hero does not understand what they want from him. She screams for him to give her the grass. Tsukasa nervously takes out a bag and shakes out the godzilla grass. The herbalist says that the herb is perfect and she will finally make medicine for the sick. She notes that the hero is lucky that there is nothing mixed into the herbs, otherwise she would have skinned him. Tsukasa asks the woman how she can create medicine without having the necessary specialization. She glances at him. The herbalist asks what the hero is mumbling about, and, shouting, explains that if there is knowledge and skills, then anyone can prepare medicine. Tsukasa is dumbfounded. She tells him that he doesn't have to be a chef to cook food, and so it is here. Tsukasa asks, confused, what the difference is then. Tsukasa asks the apothecary about the advantages of being an apothecary. He says he doesn't know much, but he thinks it can be more efficient at collecting and mixing ingredients. He thinks she knows more than she lets on. The hero understands that specialization expands and optimizes the collected knowledge, as well as certain actions. He understood everything the herbalist was talking about and was about to leave, but she pulled him back and stopped him. The pharmacist tells him that she needs his help in creating a medicine, which means he will stay here and work. The village chief leaves them alone and wishes Tsukasa luck. The hero is perplexed. Although he is dissatisfied, he still stays in the apothecary's house and gets to work. He mixes the ingredients in a large bowl. The character approaches the herbalist and asks her if what he has prepared will do. She looks at the potion and says that it is not bad. She hands him a new vat and tells him to mix it now too. The hero is perplexed again, but is forced to go to work. He thought that the apothecary only needed the herb dazul, but this turned out to be wrong. Tsukasa is confused as to why he should be doing this at all. He thought he would learn more about creating medicine, but instead he ends up doing Sisyphean labor. The woman tells him to move on to the next vat when she's done with this one. She yells at him not to shirk his work. The tired hero decides to see if his efforts can help improve his efficiency. He doesn't consider it cheating. The character uses his magic and changes his specialization. The herbalist looks at him with confusion. The hero began to understand what each of the herbs was needed for. Now he skillfully sorts them and mixes them in a vat at high speed. The woman notes that he is getting better and better at handling herbs. The character thanks her. He thinks about how he felt when he was a swordsman. Now he finally understands how to control his body. He has figured everything out and calls the herbalist by her name, Mrs. Gerda. The hero asks her if she is drying her herbs now. She answers affirmatively and explains that it is necessary to enhance the healing effect. Tsukasa says that he can handle it faster and asks her for herbs. He understands that apothecaries have special skills that need to be tested. The character uses a spell to dry plants and they dry very quickly in his hands. He gives the herbs to Gerda. She is surprised and wary. The herbalist tells Tsukasa that he said he was a mage. She explains that the mages don't have such a spell, whereas the hero managed to dry the herbs so quickly. Tsukasa thinks that the atmosphere here is very tense. He says that his specialty is that he can change specializations. He explains that he just switched to the apothecary job to use this skill. Gerda suspiciously asks how he was able to change his specialization from a magician to an apothecary. The hero is surprised that she considers his abilities something unusual. The herbalist starts screaming and shouts that this can't be. No one has ever heard of changing specialization. She tells the hero to think with his own head. The character thinks about the strangeness of being lectured on common sense in the world of swords and magic. Gerda explains to him that specialization is something that is given to a person from birth, and he, of course, cannot change it. She is confident in the correctness of what she says. Tsukasa is very surprised. He thought that this world was like a computer game where everyone can change their attributes and abilities whenever they want. He understands that some people can, of course, increase the level of their specialization, but it is impossible to intentionally change your skills and abilities. The hero thinks that even with such great experience, Gerda did not know about his unique abilities. It seems to him that his specialization is incredibly rare, and maybe even the only one in this world. The herbalist tells Tsukasa that he needs to be careful with such power. He agrees and thinks that with such skills, he needs to understand who he can reveal them to and who he can't. The pharmacist notes that with such abilities, he will be a very valuable assistant to her. The hero is perplexed by such a proposal. He thinks that simple help is hard enough, and now he is being given additional conditions that he was not prepared for. He explains that he was not as skilled as he might have seemed at first glance. Gerda asks the hero if he agrees with her proposal and asks what his level of apothecary specialization is. Tsukasa replies that he is level 1. The herbalist hits him on the nose and says that this is the reason why he needs to continue working. She explains to him that even at a low level, he will be able to create more types of medicine if he continues to gain new knowledge and experience, but it is important to put in all his efforts to do so. Gerda says that life is incredibly important in this world, and studying medicine will not hinder the hero in his endeavors. Tsukasa thinks that he doesn't even have anything to counter-argue with. The herbalist gives him more and more new herbs until he runs out of space on his hands. The hero thinks that he has realized one important thing. This woman is a witch. In a clearing sits a creature that looks like a hare. With a horn on its forehead, it finds something that looks like acorns and starts eating them. Another creature of the same kind sees it, and they fight for food, clashing with their small horns. Tsukasa, wearing new clothes and holding a bow, comes out from behind a tree and shoots one of the animals, hitting it right in the head. The second animal is frightened and runs away. The hero is once again happy to have gained a new level. He picks up the body of the defeated animal and says that he has lived in the village for a week, and every day he hunts monsters in the forest that he encounters on his way. The character explains that his prey is horned rabbits. Their meat is very tender and juicy. They are simply an irresistible choice for the dinner table. Their meat is very popular with the villagers and Tsukasa himself. The hero tells that it all started when the village pharmacist Gerda began to brazenly use him, and his life, full of adventures and battles, turned into something he never expected. The locals, seeing him near the pharmacist's house one day, invited him to go to the village hunting grounds with them. The hero became interested in this offer from the locals. The villagers said they had a problem and asked Tsukasa to come with them. He thought that maybe his hunting skills could be useful to the villagers during the hunt, and he went with them. Together they searched the forest for animals, but found none. The hero told them that there was no one in the place where they were looking. The hunters were discussing that they had already gotten rid of the wolf pack, and whether their location could have changed. The hero sensed other small animals and monsters. He thought that it could be his instincts or his specialty. He became lost in his thoughts and realized that the vast knowledge his ability had given him allowed him to understand that there was another pack of animals nearby. This news scared the hunters very much. Tsukasa pointed to the side and said that he felt that the animals were there. He said that he would look for them in the forest during the hunt. The hunters said that they were counting on him. It was approaching winter. The hero thinks that thanks to his actions on the hunt, he has increased his level to 8, and his hunter skills to 5. But he noted that it was becoming increasingly difficult to improve his level each time. Having taken the killed horned rabbit, the hero thought that perhaps it was time to move to some new place. He thought that the appearance of new monsters was worrying, but he was not a resident of these lands. At that moment, his thoughts were interrupted by some noise. Tsukasa returned to the village and noted that today everything was somehow more lively than usual. Right near the gate, he almost crashed into a horse, which greatly surprised the hero. In the village, he sees many traders with various goods and a lively crowd lined up for these goods. Zozo happily notes that Tsukasa has returned. The hero asks him if all these people are merchants, to which Zozo answers in the affirmative and explains that they sell things that cannot be found in these lands. The character looks around at all the merchants again and says that he knew it. At this time he goes around all the traders and examines their stalls. He understands that they are constantly moving from one place to another. He thinks about how traders, as soon as they finish in one place, move to another, and an idea arises in his head to join these traders and in this way go to other lands. Tsukasa thinks that he was considering exactly this option in his head. He decides that the heavens are favorable to him, and as if fate itself is telling him to go further, he takes off from the spot. He runs past Zozo, who does not understand where the hero is running, gives him the killed horned rabbit and runs to one of the merchants, loudly addressing him. The merchant responds to the cry. The hero approaches a merchant girl and asks if she is the boss here. The girl calls a certain Giselle. Giselle is taking stock of the goods in her carriage. Tsukasa says he wanted to ask him something. The man asks what he could do for the hero. The merchant replies that the hero understood everything correctly, and in 2 days they are leaving for another city. He asks if the hero wants to go with them. The character says that he does, if it is possible. Giselle agrees to take him with her. He asks if Tsukasa could help guard their caravan on the way, because having someone like him around is reassuring. The hero is surprised that they already know about his abilities as a hunter. The character understands that during the fair everyone discussed everything they could with everyone, which means that the merchants learned about his abilities from the villagers, which is probably what was to be expected. Tsukasa says that such work is not a problem for him, and he will gladly help the merchants and protect them on the road. Giselle likes the hero's mood and offers to seal their deal. The heroes shake hands in agreement. The character thinks that handshakes are also used in this world. At that moment someone calls him. It is Zozo, who says that he heard his conversation with Giselle. Tsukasa explains what he discussed with him. Zozo is confused and tells the hero that he thinks he is leaving the village. The boy doesn't understand why he's leaving the village. Tsukasa is embarrassed and silent. He replies that there is no point in him staying here. This situation reminds him of one of his job quits in the real world. He remembers it. Zozo does not understand why the hero fell into such a stupor after his questions. The character apologizes for not telling him right away and explains. He says that he wants to see the world and become stronger. Zozo replies that it is very cool, And although he is sad about this decision, he respects the hero's choice, because it is his life, and he himself decides what to do. He wishes the hero a safe journey. Tsukasa thinks that Zozo is really cute, and that he is very glad that they became friends. The hero tells the head of the village, Este, about his decision. He listens to him calmly and nods understandingly. He says that this means that the character is going to rustle. Tsukasa thinks about how Este always answered his questions without any malice. And now, he appreciates that he doesn't ask him about everything. He apologizes for leaving after all the village chief has done for him. Este calms him down and says that the hero has already helped their village a lot and saved them. They are very grateful to him for this and are not angry with the character. Tsukasa talks about his departure to the herbalist Gerda. She asks if he is leaving. The hero asks if she is unhappy with this fact. The character thinks that a specialization as an apothecary is now the highest level. He owes Gerda even for Spartan training and exploitation. It was a good lesson he learned, not to tell everyone about his skills. He remembers that during the intense work, Gerda shared with him knowledge related to a higher level of specialization. He thinks that Gerda's skills and knowledge can only be envied. He remembers their work together. The hero understands that he does not know how many years she had to collect this knowledge bit by bit, but he thinks that when using his skills, the collection of collective information is necessary. Tsukasa understands that, of course, gathering information also includes Gerda's experiences that she shared. The pharmacist says that the hero doesn't seem to want to leave. He objects. Gerda says that in that case, they should cram as much knowledge into him as possible before he leaves forever. The hero doesn't understand why he has to go through all this. Traders come into the herbalist's shop, which surprises the hero. Gerda says that Tsukasa doesn't have much time left. She tells the hero to get to work. If so, merchants leave herbs and various ingredients in Gerda's shop. The character thinks that he certainly doesn't have that many things to do, but in the end he ends up to his neck in work and helps Gerda until his departure. The morning of departure arrived. The hero bowed to all the residents, and they joyfully saw him off on his good journey, gathering at the main gate. Tsukasa is surprised that so many people came to say goodbye to him. Giselle tells him that it is not surprising, since he is their savior. The villagers say they hope to see Tsukasa again, and ask him to take care of himself. The hero goes to the carriage. They shout at him to practice more and become even stronger, and the hero is pleased with their words. Giselle asks the character if he is ready to go. He answers affirmatively and says that it is time to go. He notes that further stay here may dull his senses, and this is not at all like him. The carriage sets off on its journey, and Tsukasa thinks that he is glad that this village was the beginning of it. A rustling and noise comes from the forest. The traders turn their attention to it in fear. The hero says that he knew they would appear. The merchants are puzzled as to where the silver wolves came from and why there are any monsters in this area at all. Tsukasa asks the driver to ride as fast as possible. He says he will deal with the animals and delay them, buying some time. He prepares to create spells. The hero thinks that the silver wolves are targeting the horses pulling the carriage, which turns out to be what he was counting on. The character begins to cast spells, saying that it is time for the final task. The wolves chase the carriage, but are caught in magical traps set by Tsukasa and take damage. Some of them continue the chase. The hero again creates stone projectiles and attacks the silver wolves with them, but one of the pack manages to dodge, and he goes around the carriage from the side, heading towards the treasured horses. Tsukasa hangs out of the end of the carriage, taking out his bow, the merchants inside holding him tightly by the legs so that it does not fall out. The hero releases the taut bowstring, and the projectile flies towards the aggressive animals. The arrow pierces the last wolf through and through, and he falls. The danger has passed. Giselle happily notes that the character managed to drive off the pack. He says that they will stop the horses so that he can collect his reward. Tsukasa refuses and says that it is not worth it. He thinks that he cannot allow the merchants to linger here for long. For the sake of a small reward, the merchants do not insist. The carriage continues on its way. The hero notes that he really wants to see new lands as soon as possible, and because of this, he also does not want to linger. He is also looking forward to gaining more experience in new lands. The carriage goes beyond the horizon. A cart drawn by 2 horses was traveling along the road. The protagonist and the merchants were sitting next to the goods in barrels and sacks. They were talking to each other. One of the men cheerfully told Tsukasa that he could sell a lot of things. The guy replied that he didn't want to. Suddenly, the coachman's voice was heard. He called out to the protagonist, saying that he could see a city. Tsukasa immediately leaned out of the carriage, smiling. The boy saw Russell in front of him, shouting the name of the city. The cart was approaching the walled city. There was a huge queue at the entrance to the city. The hero looked at the line with concern. He realized that the guards who had blocked the passage with spears were checking people. Seeing that one of the visitors showed something to the guards, the guy thought about it. Then Tsukasa realized that he had nothing to prove his identity in this world. He imagined himself being detained by the guards and thrown into the dungeon. The protagonist turned to the cheerful salesman Giselle. He asked if anything needed to be done to enter. He answered in the affirmative. He said that I needed to show the registration number and pay a fee. Tsukasa calmed down, realizing that it was easy. Suddenly, the guy noticed a group of people. They showed something to the guard and passed without paying. He told the merchant about it. Giselle explained that these people were registered with the Adventurers Guild, so they didn't have to pay an entrance fee. The man showed the boy a document and told him that they, the merchants, also belonged to the guild. Tsukasa was very surprised. He thought that paying money every time would be a pain. The guard asked the next person in line to show his registration number, and Tsukasa handed him a card. The protagonist thought about the fact that his card said, Specialization Changer. He thought about how others always saw the inscription, Magician, on his card. The guy remembered that he showed the pass to Gerda several times, but she could not see the other inscription. The guard noted that it was rare to meet a person with a specialization. He asked the protagonist if he wanted to become an adventurer and received an affirmative answer. The guard welcomed Tsukasa to the city and wished him luck. The merchants entered the city and the carriage moved along the road. Giselle, who was sitting next to Tsukasa, asked if he wanted to join the guild. Hearing yes, he offered to accompany the boy so that he wouldn't get lost. He thanked him. Sitting on the cart, Tsukasa thought that his main goal was to master all the professions and live well. He remembered that in another world, he wanted the same thing. The guy decided that the fastest way to achieve his goal was to kill monsters. The thought flashed through the boy's mind that freelancing was a wonderful thing. He remembered that in Japan it was looked down upon. He thought of the man who said that working for yourself was the same as being unemployed. When the carriage stopped, Giselle and Tsukasa got off. The man thanked the protagonist for his help and handed him a bag of gold, which the guy took. Tsukasa, smiling, asked the merchants what they were going to do now. The men began unloading the goods. Giselle enthusiastically replied that when they finished laying out the goods, they would start trading. The guy, surprised, asked if they wanted to take a break, to which he was told that time was money. Tsukasa replied that he understood and wished the merchants good luck as he parted. The boy shook Giselle's hand firmly. As the protagonist walked away from the carriage, he thought that now was the time to join the Adventurers Guild. Tsukasa walked confusedly through the crowd, in which one could see representatives of various races. The guy looked around in surprise. The protagonist suddenly noticed something. Standing in front of a tall stone building, he realized that it was the guild building. Inside was a large room with a reception desk, a board for orders, tables. There were several adventurers and a guild member in the room. The protagonist approached the window. He ran his finger along the windowsill, checking the cleanliness. He thought that the atmosphere in this place was trusting. He noted that these people scared him a little, meaning adventurers. Tsukasa heard the guild member call out to the next one. A smiling girl in a uniform greeted the newcomer to the guild. She introduced herself as Louise, one of the employees. Tsukasa gave his name and said he wanted to register. The girl took out some papers and asked him to pay 500 gold and show his registration number. The guy turned away, looking for what he needed. Louise glanced at the protagonist's card. She asked if he was a mage, and Tsukasa, holding a bag of money in his hands, confirmed her words. Louise said that there was no doubt about Tsukasa's abilities and level then, and they could continue with the registration. The employee enthusiastically took out a small chest from under the counter. The girl asked to put the card in it and explained that after that the guy would receive a guild member card. The main character, surprised, did as she said. Tsukasa shielded himself with his hands from the bright light that began to emanate from the chest, and a new card began to appear out of thin air next to the old one. The girl exclaimed that everything was ready. 2 cards fell out of the chest. The main character, with his eyes closed, stood at the counter, confused. Taking a new card, the guy looked at it and asked what the adventurer rank was. The employee explained with a smile that there were 7 ranks in their guild, from S to F, with S being the highest rank and not so easy to achieve. Tsukasa raised his hand and asked if these individuals were high-ranking adventurers. The girl gave the example of a dragon knight and a beast tamer. Louise also remembered the holy knight Stefia, who was also a guardian. She noted with admiration that the adventurer's skills are at the S rank level. Tsukasa clapped his hands as he listened to the girl. He mentally noted that he was impressed by Louise's passion and deep understanding of all aspects of the job. Tsukasa thought that he understood very well that the method of promotion and reaching a high rank was kept secret. He mentally decided to sort this out later. The girl, having calmed down, thanked the guy for his interest. Louise explained that the protagonist had just registered and therefore could only take F-rank missions. At the same time, having a specialization allowed him to take E-rank missions. The employee added that if you assemble a squad, more complex tasks become available. The main character noticed a squad of 3 adventurers. The girl also said that the guild does not recommend taking on tasks beyond the norm if someone is not confident in their abilities. According to her, the rank can be either increased or decreased, depending on the completion of tasks. Tsukasa thought that the guild was similar to a recruitment agency that connected adventurers with clients. He noted that the organization did not allow anyone who was not suitable to take on a mission. The protagonist realized that the mismatch of skills to rank leads to demotion, mentally adding that this was to be expected. He thought that this was a common phenomenon in a capitalist society. The guy remembered a story about his colleague who bragged a lot to his boss, but after getting a promotion, he failed to cope with his duties and was demoted. Louise asked if Tsukasa had any questions. The guy replied that he understood everything and, bowing low, thanked the employee, which surprised her very much. The girl fell silent in shock. Tsukasa, nervous, asked if everything was okay. She waved her hands and quickly answered that it was. Louise said sheepishly that the guy was very modest and that even surprised her. The guy thought with surprise that he had simply thanked her. He began to remember that this had happened before. He tried to remember what unusual thing he could do. Looking at other adventurers, the boy realized that people with specialization are very strong. Being born like that, they feel better than others and become arrogant. Tsukasa thought that he didn't want to become like him. He wondered if such arrogance was a special form of bragging. Louise called out to the thoughtful boy. The main character approached the task board, in front of which stood other adventurers. The guy decided not to take the assignments right away, but just to look at them for now. Among the tasks of hunting monsters, gathering herbs and cleaning, he was surprised to find an advert for a babysitter. He was surprised by such a task. The guy was surprised that the guild had such assignments. Tsukasa saw many demands and decided to study the ad in more detail. The piece of paper said that an elderly elf needed help. The protagonist thought that he didn't even know about such assignments. Tsukasa noticed that the mission required an A rank. He saw that the reward amount for this mission was huge and was shocked. The protagonist enthusiastically decided that he wanted to take on this task. He thought happily that this was one of the advantages of working for yourself, having space and a lot of opportunities to work. Tsukasa decided to take on as many quests as he could from the next day onwards and focus on leveling up. The protagonist, wandering around the city, was looking for the Tiger Cat Hotel that Giselle had mentioned. Finally, he noticed a wooden sign with a picture of a cat's paw. He saw the right building in front of him. The guy walked inside, looking around. He remembered Giselle's words, who recommended this place because they had wonderful employees. That's why Tsukasa was interested in this hotel. The adventurer remembered how in Japan, an acquaintance invited him to a maid cafe, citing the cute employees and confidentiality. However, the main character didn't like this place at all. The guy angrily clenched his hand into a fist, remembering that incident. Suddenly, someone's voice pulled Tsukasa out of his memories. A little tabaxi in a dress and with braids came out to him, waving her paw. The little one said that she was glad to see a guest. The guy thought that this girl was very cute. He understood that Giselle meant. He asked if he could stay at the inn. The little girl said yes, and added that a night without food cost 600 gold pieces. She said that the boy could come down to the hall if he wanted something to eat. Tsukasa said he wanted to book a room for a week. The employee standing on the stairs thought for a moment and calculated that he would have to pay 4,200. The girl asked the guest to write his name and added that she would help him if he could not write. Tsukasa, writing his name, said that everything was fine and was surprised that there could be people who could not write. The girl looked into the notebook and, after reading his name, called the guy Mr. Tsukasa. He said to call him simply by his first name. The little girl introduced herself as Nola and said she was glad to meet her. Tabaxi and the protagonist were walking up the stairs. The girl was holding a key. She said that since Giselle recommended this place, Tsukasa would like it. The guy understood why the merchant was so excited about the inn. Nola opened the room and ran inside, spreading her arms, showing the room to the guest. It was a small, modestly furnished room. Tsukasa thought that this place was more spacious than his home in Japan, and it even looked much more comfortable. Tabaxi called this room wonderful. She cheerfully said that she washes and cleans it every day. She added that no one would like a garbage dump instead of a room. The guy silently called the baby wonderful. Tsukasa realized that cleanliness was so important to the beastmen because of their keen sense of smell. The boy suddenly thought of something and sniffed his shirt. He remembered rinsing a little during his week-long journey with the traders. He wondered if he smelled. Tsukasa asked the girl if there was a place in town to take a bath. Nola smiled and answered in the affirmative. Tsukasa walked barefoot on the stone slabs and entered the huge public bathhouse. Looking around the large hall, the protagonist realized with admiration that this place was much larger than he thought. He estimated that it could accommodate 50 or even 100 people. A dragonborn approached him from behind. The main character immediately noticed the reptilian who walked past and lowered himself into the bath. Tsukasa, looking at the humanoid lying relaxed in the water and standing in the bath for dwarves, was surprised at how many different baths there were for other races. The protagonist thought with a smile that a public bath in another world was very funny. He immediately decided to behave more decently. Tsukasa also noticed small bathtubs for the little pixies, in which the creatures were splashing around. The boy found the shampoo and noted its strange color. Watching the dwarf and Tabaxi use it, he wondered if it could be used by humans. The protagonist learned that the shampoo is made from milky fluids, has a pleasant aroma and makes hair soft, and the body soap is made from the fruits of the Vajrayana, makes the skin soft and smooth. Tsukasa decided to use them despite the unusual composition. Pouring the shampoo on his hand, he thought that he would not dwell on the name, deciding that it came from the name of some cute creature. The guy lathered his head, noting that the product had a pleasant floral scent. He thought that the shampoo was definitely not for men. Tsukasa tried to enter the bathhouse, but pulled his foot back when he felt how hot the water was. The guy thought that even if he wanted to make it hotter, he wouldn't be able to, because the muscular man sitting in the bathhouse turned off the tap. Then Tsukasa thought that even though he was a newbie, he should do the same as everyone else. The protagonist confidently entered the bathhouse. The guy stood next to the stranger, suffering from too high a temperature. The protagonist, sitting in the bath with another man, thought about how hot it was. He turned red from the high temperature. The stranger glanced at the suffering guy with a grin. Tsukasa noticed the stranger looking at him. The man silently pointed to the button. The protagonist wondered what kind of button it was. The adventurer pressed it, and water poured down on the surprised guy. The guy realized that it was a button for the shower. Shocked, Tsukasa felt the magical power while standing under the shower, and wondered if the water in these baths was heated with magic. He wondered if this ability was a special skill. Standing with a confused expression on his face, the guy noticed the stranger's stern gaze on him. He immediately smiled, which pleased the man. The happy protagonist and the contented stranger sat under the shower streams. The guy thought about how comfortable it was to live in this world. Tsukasa felt wonderful. He thought that taking a bath was very pleasant. He realized that he should have done this from the very beginning. He felt like the hot water had taken away all his fatigue. Looking at the other baths, the boy also noticed that other visitors liked it here too. The adventurer realized that even in other worlds, public baths are the most comfortable place. Tsukasa stood up confidently, deciding that he was ready for tomorrow's adventure. Suddenly, the boy noticed a relaxed reptilian in the bathhouse. He realized that it was a hot tub. The adventurer, splashing water, hurried there and pressed the button, turning on the hydromassage. However, there is a strong flow of water knocked down Tsukasa off his feet. The sign on the wall showed that these baths were for reptilians. The humanoid looked at the man who had fallen into the water in confusion. In the morning, Tsukasa went down to the hotel hall. Nola greeted the protagonist joyfully and asked if he had slept well. He stretched, thanked the tabaxi, and replied that he had indeed slept well. The girl asked the guy what he wanted for breakfast. When he didn't answer, she recommended their signature steak. Tsukasa agreed, saying he wanted to try it. Nola then passed the order to her father. The humanoid lion slicing the meat took the order. The female tabaxi holding the salad looked at the girl. Lev cooked a steak, and the girl served it to Tsukasa, apologizing for the wait. The guy looked after the girl, who was carrying several trays at once, as she walked away. The protagonist was surprised by her strength. The adventurer decided to try the dish, despite the steak being still hot. When he brought the fork to his mouth, he noticed a large amount of fat. After eating a piece, Tsukasa was surprised that the meat did not have an unpleasant smell. The main character happily thought that he could not have imagined before that he would eat steak for breakfast. The guy remembered how he made an order in one place in Japan. A voice distracted him from his thoughts. One annoying customer demanded that Nola bring him his order immediately, arguing that his time was worth more than that of an ordinary adventurer. The baby's father silently took a sword in each hand and walked out into the hall, heading towards the insolent man. Frightened, he hung on Tsukasa's shoulder, screaming. Upon arriving at the guild, the main character was confused and shocked. Standing around the corner, the boy watched a mass brawl of adventurers. They tore sheets of paper with tasks out of each other's hands. Louise was calm. Noticing the protagonist, she greeted him politely as always. Frightened, he asked her what was going on here. Louise explained that there were so many people in the guild because the quests were posted early in the morning. The protagonist asked if that was why the fight had started. He pointed to two adventurers fighting. Louise said with a smile that this was a common occurrence. Behind her shoulder, two adventurers in animal skins were fighting. The girl approached the men and reminded them of the possible demotion. They calmed down and apologized. The protagonist, looking at the fighters, was upset, realizing that he would have to make his way through them. But suddenly, Louise, unfolding a sheet of assignments in front of him, said that he could look at the assignments here too. Tsukasa immediately turned his attention to the task of collecting dozal herbs. He told the girl that he was taking on the task, and she was very happy, saying that she would draw up the necessary documents. The adventurer was surprised by her reaction. The guy suggested that they were short of medicinal herbs. The girl confirmed this and added that dozal herbs were hard to find. She asked if the guy could tell from her face. The employee explained that this is precisely the reason why the guild gives a large reward for this task. The boy enthusiastically said that he would collect as many herbs as he could. Louise said that he would be of great help to the guild. The other guild members praised him, calling him a good fellow. Tsukasa took the basket, but Louise stopped him. She said that despite having a specialization, the protagonist should put his safety first since he only became an adventurer recently. The guy agreed with a smile, and noted to himself that the ability to listen to others is an important skill. Looking at Louise's joyful expression, Tsukasa thought that he wanted to try out his apothecary skill in action, and also show others what he was capable of. As he was leaving the guild, the protagonist decided that he needed to collect a large list of completed tasks to earn more money in the future. Louise waved after him, smiling. Tsukasa walked through the forest with a basket on his back. The boy remembered that the dozal grass grows in the shallower parts of the forest. He noticed the right plant under a tree. The protagonist thought that for each plant he would receive 15 gold, and to complete the task he needed to collect 10. He would also be paid 200 gold for successful completion. He realized that this amount would be enough for a night at the inn. The boy suddenly frowned and looked angrily at the torn plant. He thought that completing this task would take a long time. Tsukasa decided that it was time for him to change his specialization to apothecary. He remembered that this profession gives a special skill that allows him to enhance healing effects and prepare potions. Tsukasa remembered that at level 10 of this specialization, the skill of gathering herbs is unlocked. The protagonist changed his profession. After changing the specialization for the adventurer, the dozala herb began to glow red, which made it possible to distinguish it from the fake herbs that were mixed in with the real ones. The protagonist began collecting, looking for herbs behind rocks and trees. He thought with disappointment that the skill did not allow him to identify herbs that had already been picked. But Tsukasa still noted that thanks to this ability, he could easily complete this task. Sitting on his knees in the middle of the field, he happily threw the collected plants into the basket. At the guild, Louise greeted the protagonist and asked if he had managed to collect the herbs. The guy, who was carrying a basket full of herbs on his back, answered in the affirmative. He approached and placed bags of plants in front of the girl. The employee's mouth dropped open in surprise. The guy said that he had collected about 200 herbs in total, which shocked Louise and the rest of the staff. The girl repeated the number in fear. The protagonist asked to check the herbs. After checking the plants with the rest of the staff, Louise confirmed that these were all Dazula herbs, and there were 206 of them. One of the staff wiped the sweat from his forehead. Louise, looking at the protagonist with suspicion, asked Tsukasa how he had collected it so quickly. Herbs, if he has a specialization of a magician and not an apothecary. The boy mentally noted that he knew the guild workers would suspect something was wrong. Tsukasa replied that he had been trained by an experienced pharmacist, referring to Gerda. He added that this was the reason why he had such high skills. Louise accepted the explanation, saying that it made sense. The employee apologized for her behavior and confirmed that Tsukasa had collected the required number of herbs to complete the task. She asked if he wanted to sell the remaining 196 plants. The protagonist agreed. In total, he received 10,300 gold for collecting herbs. The adventurer remembered his mentor, whom he had cursed before. Now he realized that her difficult tasks had been good for him. The guy realized that there was still some time left. He put 2 tasks for collecting herbs, Kirk and Spale, in front of the employees. The shocked guild members froze with their mouths open. Louise asked if Tsukasa planned to collect the same amount of these plants. The guy answered in the affirmative, enthusiastically explaining that these herbs were very necessary. The staff was scared by the upcoming plant counting. The adventurer returned to the guild, carrying large bags of herbs on his back. The guild workers were very tired from counting the plants. Louise offered Tsukasa a new task, and he was surprised by her offer. The guy began to hesitate, thinking. He said that usually there is data collection for execution. Louise put 2 assignments in front of the main character, slapping the table. The employee exclaimed that the guy was crazy. She said that she had never heard of an adventurer being able to collect hundreds of herbs in one day. Tsukasa asked if the shortage of medicinal plants had been fixed. He also thought that he liked the leisurely herb-gathering quests, but he was too fixated on them. Louise said that thanks to Tsukasa, this problem was solved. She explained to the puzzled boy that he did not seem like an ordinary adventurer. Louise confidently said that the guild would not want to waste such talent. She suggested that the boy take a rank-up quest, adding that it would most likely not be a problem for him. The guy was shocked. Suddenly, he slammed the table. Tsukasa enthusiastically told Louise that he agreed to take the task, scaring the employee in the process. The main character thought to himself that this was the promised long-awaited growth. The guy aimed to destroy all the monsters. Clenching his hand into a fist, he looked up. Turning to the employee, Tsukasa asked what he needed to do. Louise, realizing what she had to do, pushed the tasks of eliminating the kobolds and boars towards him. He said he was taking both assignments, which surprised her greatly. The employee smiled and noted that for a mage like Tsukasa, this was no problem. Finally, the girl asked the protagonist to be careful. Louise put a seal on both assignments. As he walked through the forest, Tsukasa thought about how he had already encountered mysterious beasts and monsters in this world, and had subdued many of them. He wondered if he had already gone beyond the limits of an ordinary adventurer. The protagonist thought that it seemed that kobolds and boars were ordinary monsters. He wondered which of them he would find first. The guy suddenly sat down on one knee and, happily, began to collect herbs. He immediately snapped out of it, looking at the plant in his hand in shock. Tsukasa exclaimed that he was too focused on collecting herbs. The adventurer stood up, saying that he did it out of habit. The guy decided to concentrate, since today was a crucial day for him and he could run into monsters at any moment. Suddenly, Tsukasa noticed a red boar. The beast rushed at the main character. The guy launched a magical charge at the animal to repel its attack. The boar fell, which made the guy very happy. The adventurer immediately saw an icon with a picture of meat with bewilderment. Suddenly, 2 more angry, furiously roaring boars rushed out from the bushes on both sides of Tsukasa. The protagonist defeated them with a single spell that made rocks grow from the ground. The animals were thrown into the air. The main character broke off the boar's tusks with one movement. He thought happily that he had managed to win and that he had even received a scratch in the fight. Tsukasa thought about how he was leveling up his wizard abilities by using magic. He thought that on one hand it was good, but on the other hand he realized that there was no balance in his leveling up. Then the adventurer decided that his advantage was in his flexible adaptation to specializations. He realized that the more aces up his sleeve, the better. Then Tsukasa decided to try out other skills on the kobolds. The protagonist discovered a kobold encampment. The guy saw dog-like beastmen carrying homemade spears. The boy changed his specialization to a thief. He rushed towards the monsters with great speed. Tsukasa snatched a weapon from the clutches of one of them, using his ability Steal. The kobold was very surprised and frightened when he saw that the spear he had been holding just a second ago had suddenly disappeared somewhere. Tsukasa quickly changed his job to a spearman. He made a wide swing with his new weapon. The blow hit the kobold's face and the monster fell to the ground. The other monster, also holding a spear, jumped back in fear. The main character, clutching the weapon in his trembling hands, was glad that he had succeeded. Another monster rushed at the guy with a roar. Twisting the spear in his hands, the main character repelled the attack. With a powerful swing of his spear, he threw the enemy back. Out of the corner of his eye, Tsukasa noticed that the other kobold was raising his weapon to attack him. The protagonist struck first with a quick blow of his spear, throwing the monster aside. Turning forward again, Tsukasa swung his spear wide and knocked another monster off its feet. Tsukasa raised his hands holding the spear behind his head, standing over his prone opponent. With one powerful, precise blow to the chest, he ended the creature's life. The main character, looking at the defeated kobolds, happily thought that the tasks were completed. When Tsukasa returned to the guild and showed the trophies to the staff, Louise congratulated him on completing the task. She happily informed the boy that he had been promoted to E rank. The protagonist thanked the girl, who leaned over the counter and exclaimed that he was incredible. She said that he was the first person to rise so quickly in the Adventurers Guild. The guy tried to explain to the employee that it was all about his specialization, but she interrupted him. The girl countered that other adventurers took at least 10 days to advance. Looking at the employee's enthusiasm, the protagonist thought that this was an incredible achievement for the guild. He said that he wanted to continue working hard and get a D rank, and Louise admired his modesty. The protagonist enthusiastically decided that he would definitely achieve S rank. Louise said that the number of additional tasks would increase, and recommended keeping healing and recovery potions on hand. Tsukasa's enthusiasm faded. He looked at the girl suspiciously and realized that Louise had casually mentioned something important. The main character thought that potions are created by alchemists. Although the boy could make them himself, he wanted to see how others worked. He asked Louise where to buy potions. The girl explained how to find the shop and said that its manager was an alchemist. Tsukasa walked out of the guild building, heading in the direction indicated. He thought enthusiastically about meeting someone who had a specialization for the first time. The protagonist realized that he wanted to improve his connections for further benefit. The guy remembered Louise's hesitant answer, which made him nervous. Walking around the city, the guy remembered that it was quite difficult to negotiate with the holders of specializations. He assumed that this was due to their difficult character. The protagonist hoped that he would get by without any trouble. Tsukasa reached the place Louise had indicated. What he saw shocked him. The frozen adventurer stood in front of a huge, luxurious building. Tsukasa walked into a magnificent and glittering potion shop. Looking at the racks with potions, the main character was amazed and surprised by the luxury that reigned around. The guy noticed that he felt like he had entered a jewelry store. He leaned over and began to look at the assortment, looking for healing potions. He saw potions of agility, mana restoration, and potions for breathing underwater. Soon the protagonist found what he was looking for. On the display case were healing potions of 3 ranks. Weak potions healed minor wounds, medium potions fused bones when broken, and higher potions restored lost limbs. The boy realized that the higher the rank, the more effective the remedy. He thought gloomily about the lost limbs. Tsukasa looked at the prices and was surprised that he would have to pay 100 gold pieces for a weak potion. The boy was shocked. Clutching his small bag of money, he remembered that he had earned only 14 gold coins from collecting herbs. He thought indignantly that for that kind of money the potions were guaranteed to work. An alchemist suddenly appeared behind the main character and asked the buyer if he liked the goods in any way. The guy got scared and screamed in surprise. A short old man in rich clothes appeared before the main character. His expression was displeased. The guy said that the seller scared him. Tsukasa apologized. Smiling, he politely explained that he was an E rank, and that the prices at the store surprised him a little. The alchemist snorted and irritably called the protagonist a low-ranking adventurer. The man began to explain that the price of his goods was so high because of the high cost of the raw materials, and because he collected the herbs himself and studied alchemy for many years. Tsukasa looked at the potions with disbelief. Having estimated the cost of a weak healing potion, the protagonist realized that it should cost about 2,000 goals, which was much less than the stated price. The alchemist began to talk about himself and his family. Without listening to him, Tsukasa, lost in thought, realized that alchemists ask huge prices for their services, but adventurers still need to be treated somehow. The seller continued speaking. At the same time, the protagonist remembered that he himself had once been engaged in trade. Lost in his memories, Tsukasa recalled his boss's words about how he could set the prices of his goods himself, regardless of the cost price. The alchemist continued to talk about himself. The protagonist realized that the cost of the raw materials is unimportant. The skills of the alchemist himself are taken into account first and foremost, and they are worth their weight in gold. The alchemist was indignant that Tsukasa was not listening to him. The boy thought that he had alchemist skills. He smiled broadly at the seller. The protagonist quickly left the store, saying goodbye. The salesman angrily told him not to come back. Walking through the city, the adventurer enthusiastically decided to start preparing the potion. Arriving at the crowded market, Tsukasa began to wander around, purchasing all the necessary ingredients and bottles. Standing in front of the equipment laid out on the table, the guy noted that he had also purchased a couple of gadgets from the hardware store. Then Tsukasa changed his specialization to an alchemist. First, the guy decided to make magic water. He poured ordinary water into the pan and, using telekinesis, carefully lifted it above the table. The adventurer imbued the water with his magic. He conjured a fireball. Shocked, he began to heat the water. The liquid in the pan began to sparkle. The protagonist concluded that the magic water was ready. The guy wiped the sweat from his forehead. While the water poured into the jugs was cooling, the main character decided to work with the extractor standing on the table. He carefully tore off 10 leaves from each of the blackbird grass and the common grass. He placed the torn leaves in a round flask and, using a spell, crushed them. After finishing, Tsukasa conjured a fireball again to heat the leaves. The liquid began to bubble. The protagonist cast a spell, looking intently at the extractor, standing with his hand outstretched. The guy extracted the healing ingredients from the mixture. He then secured the components. Folding his arms across his chest, the frowning guy waited until the jar filled drop by drop and closed the lid. The potion was ready. Tsukasa realized that the more potions he sold, the more experience points he would earn. The boy enthusiastically continued to make even more potions. Day turned to night. In the morning, Tsukasa leaned out of the window, opening the shutters. Then he saw that it was already light outside. He realized that he had been so engrossed in his potions that he hadn't even noticed that morning had come. The boy standing by the window turned around, looking at the 2 boxes filled with the potions he had prepared. Tsukasa calculated that the cost of 1 potion was 2,000 goals. The guy added to this amount the markup for the alchemist's work, calculating how much he would earn. Imagining mountains of gold coins, the guy was very happy. The adventurer decided that he would go sell these potions today. The boy began to put the bottles in his bag. Tsukasa thought that it would be better to sell them quickly, because potions, like food, have an expiration date. The guy slung a bag of potions over his shoulder. The protagonist went out, saying goodbye to Nola, who was sweeping the floor. He thought that no one knew about him, so people would not want to buy his potions. The adventurer went out into the city, heading to the right place. Tsukasa thought about how he found a place yesterday that would help him solve his problem. Stopping at the right store, the protagonist looked up. The establishment was called Liesel's Store. The sign below said that this place had its own appraiser. The adventurer thought that if the appraiser working in this shop saw his potions, he would definitely want to buy them. The guy slapped his bag of potions and opened the door. The bell hanging above the lintel rang. The boy entered the potion shop, where there were no other customers except him. The bored elf behind the counter greeted him without enthusiasm. The girl looked at the guy with a bored look. The protagonist looked around the empty premises and mentally noted that there weren't too many customers in this store. Approaching the counter, Tsukasa handed the girl his bag. He said that he would like to offer the girl his goods. The elf immediately perked up and jumped up from her seat. Opening her bag, she grabbed the bottle, and her delight immediately turned to disappointment and boredom. The girl asked the protagonist if he had seen the sign outside. She angrily told the guy not to waste her time and not to bring pathetic fakes. Tsukasa protested that they were real potions, but the appraiser told him not to lie. She replied that he was not a mage. The elf added that he had good stats, but his level and rank left much to be desired. The girl leaned over and, putting her hands on her hips, looked closely at the visitor. A glow appeared next to the elf. She said that the guy would not be able to make a healing potion. The protagonist noticed her gaze. Then he realized that the girl had used evaluation magic on him. Tsukasa handed the confused girl one of the potions and asked her to check at least one first. The bewildered elf looked at the bottle and was shocked. Squeezing the jar, she exclaimed in disbelief that this was a top-quality potion. The girl apologized for attacking the guy with accusations. Tsukasa reminded her that he wanted to sell the potions. The appraiser sadly said that she would not mind buying the potions from him, but she did not have that much money. She added that the average price of one such potion was no less than 100,000 golas. The protagonist happily replied that he was ready to lower the price to 80,000. The surprised saleswoman objected that there was no point. She said that in other places he would be paid a much higher price for these potions. Tsukasa retorted with a smile that he would rather work with a store that had its own appraiser. The saleswoman looked at the guy suspiciously. Putting her hand on her hip and grinning, she said that the guy was ready to sell the potions cheaply, just so as not to spread where he got them from. The saleswoman and the adventurer shook hands. The girl introduced herself as Liesel and added that she was happy to cooperate. Tsukasa mentally rejoiced at the deal he had just made. Looking at the girl who was tightly squeezing his hand, he thought that he was sure that he would work well with this elf. Liesel put up a sign stating that the shop had high-quality healing potions. She said that she was displaying Tsukasa's goods, and added that if he had any other potions, he should feel free to bring them in for sale. Tsukasa exclaimed that he had just made another 50 mana recovery potions. Covering herself with her hands, the girl asked in shock how much he had prepared. The elf enthusiastically exclaimed that she would strike it rich with Tsukasa's help. Raising her clenched fists, she told him to bring all the potions here. The girl said that she wanted to sell all the goods the guy brought as soon as possible. The protagonist said that all that was left was to wait for customers. Liesel offered him to sit on the chair behind the counter, which he did. The protagonist thought about how he had sold potions for 800,000 gols. Happy, he and Liesel shook hands. Tsukasa was walking through the city. After selling potions, the guy decided to look into a weapon shop. The adventurer thought that by working as an alchemist, he would most likely be able to live comfortably until the end of his days. But Tsukasa realized that the world is fickle, and one day his potions will become useless. The guy imagined his boss saying that he hadn't seen alchemists for a long time. He realized that he needed an alternative source of income. The adventurer saw a large stone building with a sign that read, Doran's Armory. The guy opened the door and saw a huge room in front of him, with various weapons standing along the walls. Looking around in surprise, Tsukasa walked inside. He noted that the weapons in this world boosted stats and had level requirements to equip. The adventurer noted that, for example, his iron sword does not require an equipment level. He thought that maybe he should upgrade his sword but realized that his staff was enough. The guy thought that he changed jobs often, and therefore he could use both staffs and swords. Suddenly, a thought came to his mind and he froze. Nervously, the protagonist wondered how much permanent equipment he would need in that case. Tsukasa realized that his 800,000 would not be enough to buy equipment for each of his 20 jobs. The guy was scared and shocked. He realized that he was not a rich man, but a beggar. The protagonist reassured himself that he most likely did not need to buy equipment for all 20 professions at once. He also wondered how he would wear all the equipment on himself. The guy exhaled tiredly. The adventurer looked into one of the halls. He saw a blacksmith forging a blade and called him. The seller, who turned out to be a bald dwarf with a beard, took off his mask and walked towards him. The man, looking sullenly at the main character, called him a strange boy. Tsukasa asked why he said that. The salesman replied that he had worked in a forge all his life and could immediately tell what the customer was fighting with. And Tsukasa could fight with both a sword and a staff, and also had a strange aura. The dwarf asked if his client had any specific requests. Tsukasa said that the weapon should be one that he could use magic. The blacksmith then asked about the type of weapon he wanted. The guy said he could use a short sword, a staff, a dagger. The dwarf asked suspiciously how he could wield several types of weapons, but added that as long as the client had money, he would sell anything. Tsukasa told the departing blacksmith that the spear would suit him too, and he, as he walked away, again called his client a mysterious boy. The dwarf brought several types of weapons, and Tsukasa realized that it was impossible to carry so many weapons on his person. He thought that it looked like he would have to leave everything in the living room and select a specific weapon for each situation. The protagonist sadly said that he wanted to get some inventory. The seller replied that such things exist. Tsukasa perked up and asked if it was true. The dwarf said that they were being bought at auction by high-ranking adventurers. The blacksmith added that the starting price of the inventory was 10 million gold, which upset Tsukasa. The protagonist sadly replied that he would do without the inventory. He thought that he would not even be able to participate in the auction. After examining his client, the blacksmith noticed that the guy still needed to buy some armor. Tsukasa looked at the armor in the hall. The seller said that improved equipment would be available from level 10 and added that it was better to buy the armor in advance. The protagonist agreed, saying that he was right. The guy looked at the seller cheerfully, and he did not understand why they were looking at him like that. The protagonist thought that although the blacksmith looked like an unfriendly and rude dwarf, he cared about his customers. The adventurer sheathed his sword. As he was leaving the shop, Tsukasa thought that he needed to level up to equip good armor. Suddenly, he noticed a crowd of armed men looking at him. Tsukasa stopped in confusion, wondering why they were looking at him like that. One of them came out of the crowd and asked Tsukasa if he was the new guy who had quickly risen in rank. The guy answered in the affirmative and asked what was wrong. The men said he was doing well. The protagonist thanked them. Standing in the guild and studying the task board, the protagonist thought that with the increase in rank to E, the number of tasks increases. He enthusiastically noted that one task would be enough for him to raise his level. Tsukasa handed the quest sheet to Louise, asking if he could take it. The quest was to kill 20 goblins. Louise responded in the affirmative, adding that the adventurer was now an E-rank quest. The employee asked the protagonist if he had managed to brew the potions. He answered yes, adding that he had managed to do so thanks to some miracle. He said that alchemy was an amazing profession. Louise said dejectedly that many people had to work in the same profession their entire lives. Turning to Tsukasa, she said she was happy for him. The guy noted that it was not easy working at the front desk day in and day out. The protagonist mentally noted that he was glad to meet such a pleasant person as Liesel. He remembered the enthusiasm of the young elf. Having put her seal on the assignment, Louise happily wished the protagonist good luck with the task. Tsukasa dealt with the goblin with a swing of his sword. Several more monsters rushed at him screaming. The guy swung and threw two opponents aside. The third opponent blocked the blow with a baton. Tsukasa, having neutralized the enemy, broke his weapon. The guy happily noted that he was moving with unusual ease. He decided that it was the new equipment. The protagonist opened the status window to find out if he had leveled up to level 10. Tsukasa remembered that he had unlocked new skills by leveling up the pharmacist job. He wondered what he would gain if he leveled up the job change skill. Tsukasa thought that he should get something useful. The status window showed that a pocket inventory was available at this level to store the necessary equipment or tools for all professions. He was surprised that he could get such a useful thing at level 10. The guy tried to move the trophy to the inventory, but suddenly a cross appeared on the status window. The text on the screen said that Tsukasa had not fulfilled the conditions for receiving the pocket inventory. The guy was very angry. A new message showed that he first had to raise 5 jobs to level 10. Tsukasa thought that he had only raised the pharmacist profession to level 10. The guy thought that he still had 4 professions left to level 10. The adventurer realized that it would be easy. Tsukasa decided to raise the level with the help of goblins, who are quickly multiplying and scaring people in the area. He dealt with the 20th goblin. The notification showed that the night job had been raised to level 5. Tsukasa noted that he had completed the quest. However, he continued hunting monsters because he had not yet unlocked the conditions for obtaining the inventory. The adventurer jumped from one branch to another. Sitting on the tree, the protagonist suddenly noticed many monsters. He saw kobolds and goblins. Tsukasa realized that a fight was starting between the monsters. He was glad that so many monsters were gathered in one place. The monsters screamed and rushed at each other. They started a fight while the guy was hiding behind a rock. Running out from behind it, Tsukasa changed his profession to a magician. The adventurer ran towards the fighting monsters who noticed him. Having stopped, the guy cast a spell on the monsters with the help of his staff. The creatures froze, trapped in the massive vortex of the vortex blade. Tsukasa stood next to the whirlwind that was quickly destroying the monsters, casting a spell. The protagonist thought that even though goblins and kobolds do not provide useful materials, he has no time for them. The status window showed that he has 2 professions of level 10 out of 5, pharmacist and mage. Tsukasa crouched down and thought that following the goblins' tracks would lead him to their nest. He remembered the E-rank mission to destroy the lair of these monsters. The adventurer decided that since he wanted to level up, he'd better complete this task. Tsukasa walked out to the goblin lair. He sat on a tree, watching the entrance and thinking that completing this task would allow him to both level up and raise his rank. Thanks to his profession as a thief, Tsukasa was able to deal with the goblin from a distance. Looking into the cave, the adventurer realized that it was dark and narrow. He decided that his swordsman skills would not help him, and he already had a high enough level in the magician profession. The walking goblins were afraid of the main character, and he quickly dealt with them. The guy used the thief's passive skill, night vision. Then, Tsukasa decided that in this cave he would improve this profession. While attacking monsters, the adventurer thought that each new level increased his stats. He realized that he had a huge advantage over those with only one profession. The guy dealt with the goblins. Tsukasa thought that he felt more like an assassin than a thief, and that in the future he would like to master this profession as well. As the adventurer made his way deeper into the cave, he saw a high goblin sitting on a throne. The boy thought about how arrogant this creature was. He remembered that they were much stronger than normal goblins, and so he could die if he wasn't careful. Tsukasa thought that he would give it his all as he charged. Using telekinesis, he attacked the goblin. Moving quickly, the adventurer dealt with the monsters. The huge goblin growled, and more creatures rushed at Tsukasa, who realized that the monster had called for reinforcements. The new opponents turned out to be stronger, but the main character was much faster than them. Suddenly, the adventurer noticed a fiery funnel. Tsukasa managed to dodge it, unlike several goblins. Then the adventurer realized that the huge goblin did not see equals even among his own kind. He realized that even in the world of monsters there are enough evil creatures. The adventurer changed his profession, deciding to first deal with the shaman. The monster noticed him and conjured another fire projectile. Tsukasa resisted his spell and used shockwave, causing the shaman to scream. With one swing, the adventurer dealt with him. The high goblin was furious and gripped his sword tightly. Tsukasa noticed a huge goblin approaching him from behind, holding his heavy sword at the ready. The monster lowered his weapon, but the main character managed to jump back, dodging the blow. The goblin swung his weapon, and the adventurer dodged again. Tsukasa used the spell, Wind Stream. Tears began to flow from the monster's eyes, and he hesitated. At this time, the protagonist prepared for the blow. However, the protagonist's sword did not cause any damage due to the monster's thick skin. Tsukasa was confused. The goblin swung again, and the boy used the shockwave spell again. Taking damage, the monster dropped his sword, bent over and screamed. The adventurer cast the flash spell, and the huge goblin was defeated. The guy was happy with the quick leveling. Now the swordsman profession was at level 7, the thief profession was at level 10. He raised the Master of Professions skill to level 2, and Tsukasa himself received level 4. The adventurer noted that this was the strongest opponent he had ever met, and that he had gained a lot of experience thanks to him. Suddenly, Tsukasa noticed something. He noticed that the high goblin's chest was glowing. The guy remembered that occasionally among the monsters there are individuals with inclusions of magic stones. He ran up to the monster and pulled out the magic stone. The system window told him that this thing contained the power of a creature and could be used to create weapons, magic items, and other equipment. Tsukasa was pleased with his luck. The main character thought that he only had to raise the professions of warrior and spearman, and today the pocket inventory would be his. The adventurer received notifications. One of them said that he had reached level 10 as a spearman and level 12 as a job changer. The second said that he had fulfilled the conditions and received a pocket inventory. Tsukasa was very happy about the new item. A small floating chest appeared in the air in front of him. The main character looked at his things, of which he now had a lot. He activated the item transfer to the storage, and the items disappeared. The list that appeared in front of him showed that they were now in the inventory. Tsukasa raised his hands to the sky, thinking about how blissful this was. Tsukasa returned to the guild at night. Louise noted that he was late. The adventurer replied that he was busy leveling up. The girl noticed that he had dealt with a lot of monsters today. While evaluating the trophies, the employee was surprised to find a high goblin's magic stone and a trophy from a goblin shaman among them. Tsukasa replied that he got them by destroying a goblin nest. The employee asked the guy in confusion whether he had dealt with an entire nest of goblins on his own. The adventurer excitedly asked if this was enough to get a new rank, but the girl replied that it was not that simple. The girl said enthusiastically that, nevertheless, dealing with D-rank monsters alone was a great achievement. Louise pointed out that it was obvious that Tsukasa had abilities above rank E, and that this was cheating on the ranks. The other staff members said that this was a serious crime. Tsukasa responded that it sounded rude. The girl advised the adventurer to try to ensure that his rank corresponded to his real strength.